Hello, I'm David Goodison, and this is The Sirens of Audio.
Let me tell you what is going to happen. You will subscribe to my channel. You will subscribe carefully and precisely. The device to which you are connected to the internet is particularly sensitive. It will detect instantly any attempt to scroll on.
And if I do scroll?
If you scroll, your connection will buffer. I can create in your devices the slowest loading apps and web pages ever known.
Just tell him, Dad. Yeah, it's not working.
Now, you will tell me the reason for every podcast you've missed. With that knowledge, I will program YouTube. With that knowledge, I will know my errors and how to avoid them. With that knowledge, you will never miss another episode. We will begin.
Dwayne Boss, if I tell you what you want to know, I'll get far too many notifications in the future. I can't do that.
But you can! You will tell me! You will tell me! You will tell me!
G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio, the show that explores the universe of Doctor Who and other cult TV in the audio medium. My name's Dwayne.
And my name's Philip. G'day Dwayne, g'day audiophiles.
Philip, how you going?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you doing, Dwayne?
Yeah, excellent. We're not alone this time because from the Doctor Who show we have once again our good friend Dave. G'day Dave, thanks for joining us.
G'day guys, no, pleasure to be back. It's been a few months, but no, it's great to be back.
Always good to see you, Dave. Thanks for being with us.
I've seen you in person now more times than I've seen you online, which has been pretty cool.
Yeah, true.
Well, that just shows us that you haven't watched many episodes of the podcast, so you need to watch a few more, Dave.
I listen more than I watch, I confess.
There you got off the hook there. All right,
I can't watch your podcast in the car. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, true. You shouldn't do that. Don't do that, folks. Today on the show, we are going to be examining, potentially after re-listening, I would have to say one of the best things that Big Finish has ever done, and that would be Davros, the history of Davros pre-Genesis of the Daleks. We're going to look at the 4 episodes of that and maybe a couple of the surrounding things as well, which sort of sink into that. But before we do that, fellas, Philip, I think there is probably something you should mention.
Oh, our live event coming up in October, and actually Dave may validate whether worth coming to or not. We have Carol Ann Ford coming out, and she'll be appearing in Sydney and Melbourne. And tickets are selling really fast for that, and it's going to be a pretty amazing event. Dave, what do you think of our events when we get our guests out?
Well, look, I have already booked for the Carol Ann Ford event, so I obviously do enjoy them. Look, I think that they are big enough to not be awkward or embarrassing, but small enough that you genuinely feel at the end of it you have had time with the guest. If you've got questions for the guest, there's time for you to ask them. Everybody gets a shot at speaking to them. If you're in the autograph queue, it's not, so packed that it's just in, out, gone, wham, bam. They're genuinely fun occasions. And you know what? It's just nice to catch up with some fans in person sometimes as well.
It is. And actually, it's because of that reason I'm actually thinking about stopping selling tickets soon, because we're getting to that sort of number that I think actually I'm happy with the number we've got. And yeah, we can pay for her fares and everything, and I don't want to lose that atmosphere. So we're coming very close to maybe actually cutting off tickets. So if you haven't got tickets, you better think about getting them fast.
I have never heard you say that before, Philip. That is impressive.
No, I know. So yes, tickets have sold really well. No surprises, because there's a few things I'm hoping to hear from. I'm hoping to hear what she filmed and wasn't shown, and also what she knew about the season she was supposed to be in, because she was supposed to be in the whole 3rd season. she didn't get to do, which is a bit tragic.
Lots of goss that we've got to look forward to in October. So I think it's the 12th of October in Sydney. And of course, Katie Manning's going to be there in Sydney as well, doing the interview with Carol Ann, or at least one of the interviews. Is that right, Philip?
That is right. So Katie and Carol Ann are great friends, and Katie's in Australia anyway, and actually I'm having dinner with her soon. That's an aside, but
Of course, right.
just an aside. But she was really keen to come along. I still got to twist her arm. She doesn't want to do any autographs or do any photos. She just wants to come and interview Carol and Anne and make her the whole set of the attention. I don't know how Katie's capable of making someone else the center of the attention if she's in the room, because if she's in the room, she can't help but draw a little bit of attention. But it's if nothing else, it's bound to be an absolutely crazy companion on companion time. But that's unfortunately, it's only for Sydney. Sorry, Melbourne, but you'll have other things, and there might be one or two other treats in store for Melbourne, which you have to turn up to find out about.
Yeah, and the great thing about doing these events in Australia is that all the guests have flown out from the UK, and because they're in Australia and it's smaller and they're a long way from home, they feel as they can be a little bit more indiscreet than they would be at the big conventions in the UK, which is always fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Okay, so make sure you get over to sirensofaudio.com, grab your tickets for those events while you can. As Philip just said, we could be closing off ticket sales very soon, so get in while you can. Now, we're going to, as I said, we're going to be talking about Davros, which is Gary Russell's last contribution to Big Finish. But before we do that, well, his last major contribution to Big Finish, I should say. But before we do that, Philip, do you know what?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm going to say it anyway. The three of us have to jump down the rabbit hole. Let's go. All right, now I've got something to tell you, Philip.
Excellent.
About 24 hours ago, I let Dave know what the rabbit hole topic was, so he's had a whole 24 hours to think about it. But I'm going to give you the question first, because that's what makes it so much fun. The rabbit hole topic is to throw these questions right at you. Now, we're going to be talking about Davros. Now, one of the big things that happened with Davros over the last couple of years is that our Doctor Who showrunner came out and said that Davros is to be seen as a person out of the wheelchair now. He is no longer handicapped. We'll get to the chariot. We'll get to the chariot part. But he's out of it now. He's that's how we're now seeing him. He made the decision that that's where Davros was going. It was never officially said in the TV show. So if we're going to be that precious about it, we can say, no, it never did appear in the TV show, but come on, it did. Russell T Davies said it, so what he says goes. We know that. So I want to ask you the question about classic monsters and characters who have been brought back from the classic series to the new series. How far should we go to change them? Like, for instance, we had the Autons, who were changed a little bit from the squid-like thing to a squidgy massive plastic. We had the Silurians, who were changed under the Chibnall era. The Cybermen were changed to an extent. There was a good reason for that in the story, but they were still changed to a degree. There were lots of the Sea Devils as well are about to be changed. I mean, they came back to the series, but they were
perhaps if they are Sea Devils, we don't actually fully know what they are. Maybe they're not Sea Devils. Maybe
Philip,
I don't know.
Philip, they're Sea Devils. I'm telling you now.
Yeah, okay.
The Macra was a big one for me. I had a huge issue with the Macra when they came back, because the Macra were intelligent beings. They weren't these crazy, pincer snapping monsters that we got in Gridlock. The Master changed to a degree. In fact, the Master changed to a woman. That was the first time we saw the male Time Lord change into the female Time Lord. The Zygons changed considerably. Omega was very much changed. Sutek was changed. We know that very well. The Rani was changed to a degree as well, with the bi-generation too. How much does that work for you, Philip? Should we change it, or should we try and stick to how it was in the classic series? Did they go too far in the new series of Doctor Who? You tell me.
Well, I think you've done too many to actually describe, because in some senses, yes, some might say yes, they've gone too far. Others I would say it's fine. It's a new show. It needs to look a bit different. It does need to be updated. So in terms of what they did with the Daleks, I have no issues. I think
I didn't mention the Daleks.
I know you didn't. That's why I'm starting with the Daleks. I know some Doctor Who stuff too, Dwayne, and I can come up with some stuff. So the Daleks I had no issues with in terms of how because they kept the silhouette, they kept the basic shape, they kept the basic functions. I was happy with that, and the Daleks did modify themselves a bit over the next 15 years. You got to remember, in 26 years, the show had already changed characters a lot. So the Silurians, from when they first appeared with John Pertwee, by the time they appeared again with Peter Davison, they changed the look quite considerably. Yeah, quite considerably. Enough. And so it's not unusual that it changed again. Now, if there's good story reasons for doing it, I don't have a problem with that. And it's a good story. I mean, part of the issues with the 11th Doctor Silurian story, is it the Hungry Earth, and I forget what they're both called, is they're just not very good. And so, because the stories aren't very good,
Hungry
it's
Earth
hard,
and Cold War, wasn't it?
Something like that. But because the
Cold
stories
Blood.
aren't
Cold Blood, yeah.
because the stories aren't very good, then it's a bit harder to accept the monster change. See, the Rani, no issues with it all. I thought that was a fine change. I didn't really have issues with Missy particularly. I don't know quite why they did it. No major issues there. Cybermen all made sense in terms of the look was the same. The Macra, it just was the Macra was just misused. There's certain times where, particularly, Russell has wanted just for people to go, oh wow, it's the Macra, and there's no purpose of them being there. It was just, what do you have at the bottom of the smoke pit? The Macra. Oh wow, it's the Macra. Oh wow, it's Sutek. Oh wow, it's Omega. But it's actually no connection at all to the original show. They're not the same characters. They don't look the same. So in all those times, that was just to get a oh wow reaction. And I must admit, emotionally, it actually did. In that second last episode of the last season of Shooting Atwa, when Omega gets mentioned and she's going to try and rescue Omega, my little fan heart went, oh, how exciting! Until I thought about, oh, what did he do with Sutek though? And then when they did actually bring out Omega out of the pit, it was, oh, you're kidding me. So my fan heart does get excited by the prospect of what they can do, and in a good script, I don't care. But in a bad script, you just have to shake your head and go, what have they done? So Sutek, Omega, why? But aside from that, no, I'm happy enough with change. I think time does change. I was concerned if this are the Sea Devils in the Land Between War and Sea. I was certainly concerned when I first saw pictures of them. Having seen the clips, though, and seeing how they're acting, I'm actually quite excited for the show because I think it could actually be very good. And just in terms of Davros, out of his chariot and his life support system, that was before he lost his legs, because he's not in a wheelchair. He's in a life support system, or chariot is what it's called in the show. And that's before, that's the Doctor putting the plunger in that Mark 1, Mark 4 Dalek machine. So it's before Genesis of the Daleks, before he's lost his legs. Yeah, and the rest I'll just ignore because, whatever commentary happens outside of the show, that's not canon.
Okay. That's your view? Dave, you've had a bit longer to think about this. What's your view on the question?
First of all, I've just got to agree with Phil that I agree that if it's not in the show, it's just RTD sort of extemporising in some format. Doesn't count, because if you try and get everything that RTD says randomly, you're going down too many rabbit holes. More rabbit holes than you gentlemen could even go down. So we'll be very careful there. To answer your question, Dwayne, in this rabbit hole, I have two probably main thoughts. The first is I think that it's okay to change or evolve a character or a monster or an idea until you get to the point where it's such a different concept that you might as well have started from scratch and done another character. And my other criteria is that you shouldn't be doing it if you ruin a perfect once-off appearance. So for me, Sutek counts as the latter one. I think that the Sutek's appearance in Pyramids of Mars was such a perfect, self-contained, one-off story and one-off appearance with a beginning, a middle, and an end for the character. You don't need to bring him back without. So do something else, do something different. Going back to the first one, I think a really good example in the classic series of changing are in fact the Sea Devils the first time around. Because when they got to season 9, they thought, okay, let's do a sequel to the Silurians. They decide they're going to get the support of the Navy. They're going to do it underwater. And they were originally meant to be the Silurians. Then they became the Sea Silurians. At some point, they've gone, these things are now so different from the cave-dwelling Silurians of the first story. Let's not call them the Sea Silurians. Let's say they're a cousin, but a different species, and they invent the Sea Devils. So it's a whole new idea, and I think that's a really good way to do it. The contrast is, of course, Davros. Now, I'm not going to down the rabbit hole inside the rabbit hole of whether Davros being in a chariot is a comment on other things. That's for other things. I know you guys have discussed that in the past, and I got very worried when you did that Mummy and Daddy were fighting. But I do that once you've taken the conception of Davros as a wounded, hurt, mutated, whatever phrase you want to use, significantly changed person that is fundamental to the character. And when you take him out of the chariot, you remove all the disfigurement and all that goes with it. You're actually changing the whole rationale for the character. You're changing the look of the character. At that point, don't do the same character. Invent a new character. So I think that there is a point reached where you change so much that you're actually not paying homage to the first one. And invent a new thing.
Yeah.
Very good. I think the main issue I had with the early years of New Who was the appearance of the Macra, because there seemed to be no reason for the Macra to be there. They were evolved from this somewhat much smaller creature into this massive creature that was just snapping their pincers and more sort of bestial. And I just didn't see any reason for it other than, they breathe gas, so let's put those gas monsters in and let's make those Doctor Who fans go, wow. But, those classic fans go, wow, that actually knew what they were.
And the thing is, too, they didn't need to make them bestial. They could have actually still been the same Macra, just as intelligent, who had actually designed and manipulated the whole thing to get their gas. So,
I think, Phil, that would have been a very interesting episode and probably, in my view, a better resolution than we got in Gridlock. The flip side of that, though, Dwayne, and let's be honest here, look at the parallel universe, is if they'd had something a bit crab-like and a bit terrifying snipping at the bottom of the thing in Gridlock and they hadn't called them Macra, would we be sitting here having a conversation going, you know what's a real shame? That they had crabs in the new series and they didn't call them Macra. That would have been a great callback.
Yeah, that's right. I always had a bit of an issue with the Silurians as well. I didn't like the redesign back in the 11th Doctor's era when they first came back. I just thought that was just a step too far. Much more human than reptilian, I thought. Even though it is explained to a degree within the story, not really. Didn't really satisfy me as a classic fan anyway.
I had a bigger problem with the redesign in Warriors of the Deep because they lost the terror of the third eye of the Silurians. Because one of the things that absolutely terrified me as a very young kid, 5, 6, 7 years old, watching the Silurians on repeat here in Australia, was that all they had to do was look at you and they could zap you. And that's a pretty... And they did it. They zapped everyone. They could walk through rock. They could close doors with their... It was a really powerful sort of thing that makes them feel almost unstoppable. And then suddenly in Warriors of the Deep, it's just a thing that flashes when they talk. And you just go, well, they're far less scary now. So actually, as much as I'm a defender of Warriors of the Deep, I think it's actually a pretty good story. I like it. I do think that the Silurian redesign is a problem there because they've lost something that was really fundamental to the character in that.
And it's strange that they were so radically redesigned with Ian Levine in the wings back then. He should have been onto that like a shot, shouldn't he?
Well, I think the story is that Ian Levine put forward about 60 things that were wrong with the script. And Eric Saywood just said, just throws his hand up and goes, I'm not rewriting this entire thing to put in your 60-something errors, so, bugger off.
Yeah, I can see that happening too.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Philip, I've got your feeling that it's okay to change things as long as it's, within context. Dave, you're okay with changes in things as well?
To a point. I think there's a point at which you evolve before you go, this is too far. Invent something new.
Okay. Have you seen anything specific in the new series that's crossed that line for you personally?
Oh, Omega would be the absolute nadir of that. To go from one of the founders of Time Lord Society, a tragic figure, a figure that the Doctor can talk to, and the Doctor feels genuine admiration for and sympathy for, to go from that to a great big CGI skeleton going, "Wah!" What's the point? Why call that Omega? Invent a new villain. Invent the ancient villain Dwayneville or something, and just do that. Don't make it. Why? It's not even close.
And there's so many other options. You could actually have Peter Davison walking through that door, because that was the last form that Omega held, and I mean there was all these things they could have done, which could have satisfied the fans much, much more than that disaster and the waste of money on that CGI effect and the waste of the Rani. Like there was so much wasted in 5 minutes.
Or again, invent a new concept, invent a new monster, invent a new character, because one of the, I think, valid criticisms of New Who is that they're not good at inventing monsters in the way that old Who was. And yet, yes, monsters is a different sort of concept now than it was, and nobody's really a monster to themselves and all the rest of it, sure. But there are less of those sort of memorable monsters in New Who. This was a classic time to have the time vortex beast, or whatever you want to call it, the god of something, and create a new interesting idea, because you've already gone back to the well with the Rani, and the Rani was used pretty well, but having gone back to the well with one, you don't need to go back to the well with Omega. You can do, or Omega, depending on which studio session Shigegawa was recording in. You've already done it once. You just create something new, and I think that it's odd that Russell T Davies 20 years ago was saying, I don't want to go back to the well too much. It needs to stand on its own 2 feet. And suddenly by the end of it, you've got nothing original, to the point that, look, this is an old conversation, but that's the one that absolutely springs out, perhaps because it's the most recent.
Very good. I think I have the answers to the question that I was looking for. So, on that note, let us crawl up out of the rabbit hole, and we will start talking about one of those classic characters, Davros, that has been served so well here in this Big Finish collection that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Davros, but I think before we talk about Davros, Philip, and I don't know, Dave, if you have heard this story, but the Sixth Doctor story Davros itself was released 3 years before Davros, written by Lance Park and one of the authors of one of the stories in the Davros set. And I think this was probably the template for what was to come in Davros. What are your memories of that when you first heard it, Philip?
Oh, spectacular! I mean, we've done this. There was the trilogy of 3 villains. So we had Davros, we had Omega, and we had the Master, and those were 3 sensational shows in a row. Davros was amazing, apart from Wendy Padbury being in it, which was part of its joy, was bringing Wendy Padbury back into the fold. It was Davros with the Sixth Doctor at his most conniving and brilliant. And the fact that there was no Daleks present.
That's Davros, not the Sixth Doctor.
Well, I don't know, maybe the Sixth Doctor too. But the fact that the fact that you had Davros just so worked out with no Daleks, but able to manipulate and control. It also had Bernard Hornsfield in it as well. So
Hornsfield,
it was the most amazing cast. And the politics, the interplay, the betrayals, it was just a very, very intelligent script. And it was just amazing. The Davros back.
When I press this switch, I will die. It will be painless, they say. But if I survive, then something stronger will emerge. A new race, the supreme power in the universe. I will not press this switch. I will not cower. I will not die. I will not die. This is not the end. This is only the beginning.
He's activated the detonation sequence.
We can't outrun a nuclear blast, Doctor.
They're building an army of robots.
How long before the radiation cloud reaches the dome?
I want to write the definitive biography of Davros.
If everyone had the equation, then the whole system would collapse.
Yeah, I'm very torn with Davros because I often think when someone asks me what are your favourite Big Finishes, that Davros is possibly my favourite Sixth Doctor episode of Big Finish. I'm torn between one or two others as well.
The
but this is for the pirates. But this is a companionless Sixth Doctor story. And Dave, have you ever heard this one?
No, I actually didn't know about it until I was doing my research for this podcast this afternoon, and I had a look and thought, oh, that looks kind of cool. I think I'll check it out because Lance Parkin, I know he's written some very good Big Finish, but he wrote some very good books back in the day. Just War, The Dying Days, Father Time, some really, really good books. I'm a big fan of his work. I did have a look at the concept and thought it felt a little bit like the DWM comic Up Above the Gods. Well, I suspect from what you're just saying, it actually goes a long way beyond that.
Yeah, I think for the fact that, like Philip said, that it does have Wendy Padbury in her first Big Finish appearance, Bernard Horsfall, I think in his only Big Finish appearance, those factors alone make this a very special story. Plus, the story itself is wonderful. The Colin Baker and Terry Molloy bouncing off each other are just incredible. And to get a Davros story without the Daleks is also incredible because I think, apart from Davros, this is the only time we do get a Davros story without the Daleks. All the other times Terry Molloy's appeared in the main range and other things, he's been with the Daleks. So it's a very incredible piece of work, and I think it is available on Spotify as one of the free ones. If you go and search for Davros on Spotify, or where else would it be? I think it might be on Amazon as well, Amazon Music. You'll find that for free there. So if you don't want to buy it, it's not very expensive anyway. But if you don't want to buy it, you can go and listen to it on Spotify. It's
very clear that Colin and Terry Molloy did get on very, very well. If you ever saw the VHS Colin Baker Years release, where Colin gets to pick the clips that he wants to talk about to sum up his year of the show, he picks a number of Terry Molloy ones and just basically says, I enjoyed working with Terry Molloy. I love what he did. Let's watch some clips of him. And so they're very clearly big fans of each other's work.
Well, didn't they work together in Hound of the Baskervilles a couple of years back, the radio?
They only 12
Pearce?
months ago. Yeah, they've been touring together for the last little while, on and off for the last 2 years.
Yep, for sure. So before Davros, we had the appearance of Terry Molloy as Davros in Big Finish 3 times. So we had Davros, the story we're talking about. He also appeared in another Sixth Doctor story featuring Mel as the companion called The Juggernauts, and that story also featured the Mechanoids. And then again... Daleks. There was Daleks in that one. There was Daleks in the Juggernauts. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Definitely. The white ones.
Okay.
And Terra Firma, which was the first Eighth Doctor story after they'd come out of the Divergent universe. So, Dave, if you're not sure, the Eighth Doctor went on an arc where he went into this completely alternate universe, which also happened in the books, I think, didn't it? A couple of times? Once or twice? Yeah. Or the TARDIS was destroyed or something in the books. I can't remember.
Yeah, he lost his memory several times.
Yeah, so in the Divergent universe, they had that whole story arc. They came out of the Divergent universe back into our universe, and the last story of that ended on a cliffhanger with Davros saying, "Welcome back." And so the first story of the Eighth Doctor back in our normal universe was a Davros and Dalek story with Davros dealing with his mental instability. It was quite a strange story. And I think the companions in that story were lost companions that were never mentioned again. One of them played by Lizzie Hopley. Philip, do you remember? It was Gemma and Samson, and they're actually mentioned in Night of the Doctor. So we get a TV mention of those characters in that story. So 3 appearances of Davros beforehand. Then we came to Davros, which was an idea it was kind of brainstormed between Gary Russell. I think it was mainly Gary Russell, but Jason Haig-Ellery as well. They were looking for another mini-series to do because Nicholas Briggs had done Dalek Empire. He'd done Cyberman as well. Gary had also done Gallifrey by this point. He was about to go to Wales to go and join Doctor Who as script editor for the television series. So this was coming up to the end of his time. with Big Finish. And totally inspired by I, Claudius. They came up with I, Davros, because they enjoyed working with Terry and wanted to do something. But, obviously what they could think of to do was the story of Davros up to Genesis of the Daleks. And I think, boy, what a triumph this is. Only 4 episodes. It seems like much longer. Like I've re-listened to it again this week and I thought, was this only 4 episodes? Really? It seems so epic to me. But I'll play a trailer for that in a moment. But first of all, I'll read a blurb. I find it fascinating that a living creature would subject itself to such dangerous experimentation, knowing that it would die. The Khaled and Thal races are at war. No one really remembers why or when it started, but generations of people on both sides have lost so very much. Born into an influential family is Davros. Now aged 16, he's being pulled in various directions, and his father wants him to follow tradition and go into the military. His sister has joined the military youth, and his scheming, devoted mother wants him to pursue a life of science. But no one seems terribly interested in what Davros himself wants. So he must begin to assert himself, begin to take control over his own life, begin to work towards his own destiny.
Speak! Identify yourself! Speak! You will answer! Answer! Very well. I am Davros. I am your creator. Without me, you have no function, no reason to exist. Without me, you are nothing. We are the Daleks. We are the supreme beings in the universe. Yes, I know. I made you that way. I made you in my image. Why? A question. A Dalek asking a question? Just how far have you sunk into inferiority since my enforced separation from you all? Answer the question! Why did I make you in my image, or why did I make you at all? You exist because of the war. You exist because we needed to prove our superiority, and we did prove it, finally, absolutely. You are here as proof. The children of Davros. Children. As I was a child. Once.
I didn't ask for them. I don't need them.
I have to strike back.
Am I to take it that a crisis is already upon us?
The war has reached an absolute stalemate.
I don't want his help. I don't want anyone's help.
Thal's spy in our midst.
Are you dying, Father?
Deadlock. Total devastation. I'd like to see this radiation chamber of yours.
You're arguing about me, Tajin. I'm anxious to know if anything has survived in the radiation chamber.
It's hard to say who Davros is fond of.
Will you be dead soon?
Fire!
The truth lies elsewhere.
And I'm not your boy.
I, Davros, Innocence by Gary Hopkins. The fact, the trivia. Number 1.1 in the I, Davros range. Rory Jennings played the young Davros, with Terry Molloy playing the full-age Davros with flashback scenes, or flash-forward scenes, really. Richard Franklin played Colonel Nusgard, Caroline Johns, Lady Lady Calcula, Lizzie Hopley, Yarvel, Rita Davis as Tashak, and Peter Sauerbutz as Tutor Malgardine. There was also Sean Connolly, Richard Grieve, and Scott Hancock, and Nicholas Briggs played the Daleks. For all these shows, director was Gary Russell, music and sound designed by C. Steve Foxon, the producer was Gary Russell, executive producer Jason Haig-Ellery, and the cover art by Stuart Manning. Gary Russell had decided never to have Davros with the Daleks, and so therefore there was no Davros for the first few years, but finally he'd appeared in a story called Davros number 48, and then Juggernauts number 65 and Terra Firma in number 72. This entire story was designed to be a part of a huge epic tale, as already mentioned, partly modelled off I, Claudius, which is one of Dave's favourite TV shows, and a pretty amazing one. That starred Sir Derek Jacobi, Modern Master. And of course, I, Claudius, this was why it was called I, Davros. Looking at it now, I'm not sure it was a good idea, but it's cute. Aside from being very Terry Nation, the name Lady Calcula also sounds Roman. She was also named Calcula due to her calculating nature. Gary Hopkins had written The Last, which was number 62 in the Big Finish range, which had also starred the actress who played Calcula, Caroline Jones, as the villain. Richard Franklin, Davros' father, was played by Captain Mike Yates, actor, third Doctor companion, and the young Davros had played Tommy Connolly in the 10th Doctor story, The Idiot's Lantern. And that's some of the facts and trivia.
Thank you, Philip. I just wanted to pick up on Gary Hopkins as well. He has written also one of my favourite 8th Doctor adventures called Other Lives, which was to come not too far after this. But yeah, the last was very good. One of the things I remember about the last, though, was it was very long. They were having quite a bit of trouble editing episodes down in those days. So one episode of a 4-part story would go sometimes 40, maybe 45 minutes at a stretch. So very, very long stories, but very enjoyable at the same time. Now, Dave, I want to ask you, Philip and I have listened to Davros back when it was released 20 years ago, but you've only heard this for the first time in the last 6 months or so. Is that right?
Probably 9 months, because I heard it over summer when I was driving out to see my family for a holiday. So January this year is the first time I'd heard it, yes.
What prompted you to pick this one up?
Everybody told me that it was fantastic and that it was one that I had to see or hear, and also people did use the similarities to I, Claudius as a bit of a hook, knowing that I'm a huge fan of that. So but between that and just everybody's recommendation, when you say to people like yourselves and others, what should I be buying in Big Finish? Because as somebody who's very, not a regular purchaser of Big Finish, you walk into the room that is the Big Finish room and you go, I don't know what to pick. So I rely on people like you to tell me. And when everybody else says you need to listen to I, Davros, at some point you go, clearly I need to listen to I, Davros. And so I did.
Yeah. Philip, do you think this was the story that most definitely had to be told?
Beforehand, I wouldn't have said it needed to be, but it's been told so well. It really adds so much to Davros, the character. It is so cleverly composed, and it's a bit. I'd love to know how much Gary Russell, I think it was Lance Parkins together did the whole storylining, and each episode contains little treasures of information we know about Davros, information we know about the Daleks, about their character. But because it's such a strong character study, it's about how do people think, how do people reason, and of course the key thing about it, it's just so political. Gary Russell counts this and the first 3 seasons of Gallifrey as his favourite things he ever did for Big Finish, and all of them have this huge political side to them. It's all about interplay of characters, but a really nasty view of human nature. And where's Gallifrey? It's given some peace and niceness is the wrong word. I'm trying to think what the right word would be. There's some peace, the relentlessness of the politics because of Romana and Leela and K9. But this has nothing like that. The odd characters who you actually start to take a shine towards are going to be dead in no time. So this is just relentless the whole time through. But it makes for great drama and great soap opera and great politics. So all those things together just make this work so well.
Yeah, and I love the references in episode 1 to Dramican Lake with Davros swimming in the lake. You can just imagine him. That's the lake that we see in the Daleks, obviously, where all the creatures are, and he's trying to actually swim with the creature because he's got this kind of strange sociopathic quality all throughout the entire series. And I think, I don't know, what are your thoughts? Do you think Rory Jennings, Dave, pulled this off as the young Davros?
Look, I've got a number of things to say on things that both of you have just said, but to answer that question, I think Rory Jennings gives perhaps the most interesting performance of the entire set. Yep. I think that it's interesting to think that he would have just finished playing his character in The Idiot's Lantern when he was cast in this, because that would have aired in, April-ish of this year, and this was recorded in August, September. Yeah. So it would have been very, very close. I think that I have a number of positives and a couple of negatives about Terry Molloy's performance as Davros, but it is particularly fascinating to hear Davros very clearly as a child, very clearly as a teenager. And that to me is just a really interesting part of the story. And Jennings plays it in a really interesting way that I think that's an absolute highlight of the whole thing.
Yep. Just one question I had for you you mentioned how much you love I, Claudius. And I was listening through to this again and I'm thinking Calcula is just, I instantly think, do you think someone said to her, the actress Caroline John, wasn't it? Jones, that played that. Did someone say to her, Sian Phillips, I, Claudius, that's who you channel? Because that's what I was getting when through this. Did you get that too?
I would be stunned if she either hadn't been told or hadn't picked up on it herself, because the relationship between both the character of Calcula and the character of Livia is very, very clearly similar, but also the portrayal of Caroline Jones and Sian Phillips is very, very similar. The only way that it didn't happen is if they've both gone to the source material, which Sian Phillips talks about not getting the character of Livia and I, Claudius, until the director said to her, think of it as a Jewish farce. And then Sian Phillips has gone, I get it. So whether they've both gone to the same source material or not, I don't know. If I could just pull back a little bit, a couple of things that you guys mentioned. Yeah. Dwayne, you mentioned the lovely little references, and I think there's some particular ones, in a sense. They lift lines of dialogue and phrases from earlier episodes of Doctor Who. So the comment about Yavin being no longer a girl, not yet a woman, is straight out of the Daleks. At some point, they refer to the flying pests, which again is straight out of Evil of the Daleks.
Yes.
So there are these lovely little nuggets that go in there. And to go back to Phil's point and Dwayne's opening point, when I listened to this in January, I walked out of it and thought, this is probably the best Big Finish I've heard. And listening to it back again over the last week in preparation for the podcast, I again thought, this is the best Big Finish I've heard. But that is a really unfair thing to say to the rest of Big Finish, because of the latitude that this has by not having the Doctor in it. And that's something I want to come back to when we get to the fourth episode, because I think that is a huge cheat that perhaps is a bit of a flaw towards the end. But I'm curious what Phil said about this being full of politics, because if you take politics to be the extension of force by other means, or the extension of military operations by other means, then I don't think this necessarily qualifies, because although there's a lot of absolutely fantastic drama and interplay and corruption and the rest of that, a lot of what happens in this is because of, at the end of the day, the power flowing from the barrel of a gun. It's about who has the power, who has the weapons, rather than necessarily political intrigue. So I get where Phil's coming from, but I push back a little bit on that.
I guess I'd argue in terms of its politics, in terms of so many of the characters are involved in displacing and removing others for their own political gain. And so Calcula is on a mission to take over. She wants to become, I think, what's the term they call for the head?
Supremo.
Supremo. And so her goal is to become Supremo, and probably by force, because she's raising a military force. But in terms of making sure that her son comes in, so there's the military. You got the military angles happening in the promotions and how the military works. You got the scientific and you got the political. So you've got the three different phases that they're trying to deal with in different senses. And ultimately, you find that the military are just useless. I mean, this character, I think, it's the third episode, who just doesn't think, who has no brains, who can't reason, and is actually proud of it because they've sort of bred out all thought processes out of him. But you've got Calcula, you've got the Supremo, you've got a number of different councillors, and they're all vying for position and power. So that's why I'd argue politics.
See, I would argue that that's not Calcula's motivation. I think that had Calcula wanted to be the Supremo and lead the Council of 12 in the Congress of the Thals, or whatever the term was, she probably would have got there. And the fact that she doesn't get there, and we'll no doubt talk about it in episode 3, suggests to me that her motivations were something different. And I think that it was about that obsession for her son rather than for herself that's important. So, again, totally get how you've read that, Phil, and I don't disagree with where you're coming from, but I see a different meaning as well.
Let's discuss a bit more in episode 3, because that'll be interesting to talk about.
Sure.
couple of other references as well. There's references to two other races, and of course we get the Dals referenced, of course, which we got in the original story of the Daleks. They're mentioned there, but there is another race as well who have now become extinct due to this war, which I thought was very interesting. A nice little touch. There's another reference to, well, there's an overt reference to a comic strip in Davros's sister's name, Yarvel.
Yes,
because there was the 21st Century comic, Genesis of Evil, written by David Whitaker and Alan Fennell, and the Daleks there were said to be created by a scientist called Yarveling. So they've shoehorned that in there, which actually works in story too. Like that they could have, that reference incorrect in the comic, and they put that in the story. It's just a what's the word I'm looking for?
It's a lovely little touch. It's a nugget for those of us who look. I would have been about 11 when DWM reprinted the first dozen or so of those TV21 Dalek comics, and I absolutely was just obsessed with them when I was 11, 12 years old.
Any other little nuggets that were thrown in that you thought that stood out to you there?
Yeah, so
not in part one, but there are others to come. Sorry.
So themes in part one. So radiation, first mention of radiation starting, genetics, mutations, the need for a protective dome over the city, and that science is the answer. So those are the sort of big themes that appear in that first episode for the first time.
And even though this war we find in Genesis of the Daleks has been going for 1,000 years, I get a sense that things really ramped up during Davros's lifetime, more than they had done in the previous, 950 years before that. So
we'll talk about that in episode 2.
Will we? Okay. All right. Let's move on then to episode 2, which is called I, Davros, Purity. And I will read a blurb for that. We are Khaleds. We are more than a match for weak, tattered, crippled relics of war. Now approaching his 30th year, Davros is trying to get out of the Khaled military and into the scientific corps, determined to use his mind to create new ways to let the Khaled race survive the never-ending war with the Thals. But first, he must undertake a mission into Thal territory, a mission that will introduce him to technology and hardware he could only dream of. And it just might teach him a few life lessons too. But however dangerous the Thal city might be, that is nothing compared to the scarred relics that inhabit the wastelands he and his team have to cross twice.
You were inferior. You were a child. A child, yes. But so very much more a man than those surrounding me. A council of 12 passing their judgments in the House of Congress. They never saw what was coming. They never understood the potential because they were too scared. Too scared of my intelligence, my aptitude, my determination. It would be many years later before that weak, spineless individual who believed he ruled the Khaled city, the Supremo, finally enabled me to realize my potential. Only my mother believed in me. The rest of them feared me. And they were right to do so.
Let's all play happy family, shall we?
It's more likely my abilities have finally been noticed. I'm used to eating each other to survive.
My vision and my ideas, I could do so much more for our people.
This war can't go on forever.
What kind of weapons are they making with all this? The Thals could win the war. What the hell is that?
Is this mission dangerous?
I know I can find a way to destroy the Thals.
Enough to destroy us several times over.
But to destroy an entire race? You're going to fight?
War has its victims.
It's people like you who'll kill us all in the end.
It is my passion.
I, Davros, Purity by James Parson and Andrew Sterling Brown, the facts and the trivia. This is number 1.2 in the I, Davros range. Terry Molloy playing Davros, Caroline Jones, Lady Calcula, Lizzie Hopley as Yarvel, John Stahl as the Supremo, Peter Sauerbutz reappears as Tutor Macathrine, and then we also have appearance by Andrew Walsh and Nicholas Briggs playing the Daleks. Once again, director is Gary Russell, music and sound design by Steve Foxon, producer Gary Russell, executive producer Jason Haig-Ellery, and cover art by Stuart Manning. James Parson and Andrew Sterling Brown had previously written the experimental Big Finish episode Live 34, which is number 74 in the Big Finish range, which is all based on live performances on the radio stations. Andrew Wisher, who played Reston, was Michael Wisher's son, the very first actor to play Davros. The Dal race gets mentioned here to correct any inconsistency with the first Dalek story, and the genesis of the Daleks, and the Varga plans first appeared in the Mission to the Unknown. And that's the facts of the trivia.
So was I wrong on this one? Was the Dals mentioned in this one rather than the first one? Is that how it was?
The Dals were
getting more mixed up?
The Dals were mentioned in part, but in terms of the explanation about them being another whole race, that was all in this one.
Ah, very good.
So
it's
also
nice to
this
get
one,
Andrew Wisher in here as well.
Yeah. Well, once again, in terms of what they're playing around with Genesis Daleks was, why would you have these two warring factions of the whole planet in two domes that you could walk between in about half an hour? Because you had the Thal dome and you had the Kala dome. But in this story, it talks about the fact that on the planet there'd been several species and everyone else had become extinct. The last two left fighting in 1,000. So it's been a 1,000-year war in which the implications has been 15 or 20 species of humans who are now all dead, have all been wiped out, and only the 1,000 Kalas are left alive. And there's hardly even a memory of previous ones. The only kind of memory they have is the Dals. And they talk about the Dals and the Kalids and the Thals all being together. That's his sister talks about. They found this piece of ancient ruins.
Yeah, the ancient city. Yeah,
the ancient city, the ruins would show the fact that these people used to live together in peace and harmony. But it's so far lost the memory, it's gone.
It's such a fascinating world that Terry Nation's created, isn't it? It's a bit like Marinus, where all these different areas all over the planet so different to each other. He's done the same thing here with Skaro, but Skaro seems to merge a bit easier together than Marius.
I suspect it was bad writing. I suspect it was bad writing by Terry Nation, which other people have come along later to try and fix up.
Fixed up.
It work.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, so I think that between the first two episodes, they do a really good job of setting up a world that functions in a way that worlds in 1960s and 70s television weren't designed to function. And I think one thing that's really interesting is you do get this sense that there is more than just the capital city that is under the dome by the time we get to Genesis of the Daleks. There is the lake of mutations that Davros likes to play in, and there are estates out there. There are mentions later on to sort of towns and cities and provinces that are in other parts of Skaro and other territories as well. So this idea that there was a larger country out there that sort of got smaller and smaller and smaller until basically it could all be contained inside a dome, I think is really interesting. But the more interesting part of this is that this does create a world in which the Daleks could be created, because it's very simplistic, I think, to look at Genesis of the Daleks or the history of the Daleks in the Doctor Who monster book and say, oh, the Daleks were created by Davros, who was a mad scientist. This Davros really clearly shows that although Davros was the one who finally put the whole piece together with his vision for the Mark III travel machine, the Daleks were created by a society and 1,000 years of war. The attitudes that create the Daleks are clearly present in the entire Khaled race and the way that they operate, or certainly the way their leadership operates. The concepts of genetic purity are there. The concepts of ruthlessness are there. So, and this desperation to survive is there because of this perpetuating war. The war that defines who they are, so therefore must be perpetuated, but is the thing they're trying to survive, which is a fascinating cycle. But it does show that although Davros does create the Daleks are as much a product of this world, and Davros himself is a product of this world. So this whole world creates the Daleks. It's not the vision of one man, it's the vision of one man that comes out of the vision of a whole civilization.
Mm.
I do get a sense that the Khaleds themselves, though, are quite a horrible race of people overall.
Exactly.
But you get a sense of that with the Thals as well when we do interact with them. They've got their own motivations as well that make them seem quite ruthless in some ways as well.
Well, I think that's a wonderful part of Terry Nation's vision for the Thals, going all the way back to 1963, and again reiterated in other appearances, this idea that the Thals and the Daleks were as warlike and as ruthless as each other, but out of that final genocidal war, they've taken two different lessons. The Thals have taken the lesson of never again, and the Daleks have taken the lesson of, well, we need to be strong to win. So starting at the same point, I agree, but going in two different directions, and this absolutely builds on that. And again, it's fascinating that this is the episode where they really start to talk a lot more about the genetics of the Khalids and the fact that Khalid evolution operates differently to what we understand, so they're very susceptible to mutation, and the like of Davros's experiments that lead on from what he was learning as a young Davros, but also made very, very clear that the Thals and the Daleks, the Thals and the Khalids are not just different, political groupings or nation states or something like that. They are fundamentally different species with different DNA, different internal organs. They are very, very different species. Hence, they react differently to the conditions of Skaro.
Can I question that? Because as I was trying to listen, I was trying to understand in terms of were they, because they talk about, they've evolved from different creatures. But when I actually talked about it, actually, no, the DNA actually didn't match up an awful lot. And Jeff was, of course we have lungs because we breathe air. And they talk about the fact that, no, we are very different. We're different with different internal organs. But I'm not sure there's actually real evidence given to that, aside from this is our belief. Because, we'll get to episode 4, we'll talk about the first Dalek. But I'm not 100% convinced that actually, although they were stating the fact that we are genetically different, yes, we are, I'm not sure they really were. I actually think the Thals and the Khalids actually were humanoid, exactly the same. In fact, because their DNA did kind of mix up. That we do have the same channel. We do. I think there was a level of which they were saying, "Oh no, we're different totally." But then, whenever the evidence came about, it was actually we're the same. That when they when hit with the radiation, they decay at the same rate, and they do. I'm not convinced they actually are different.
Look, again, you both of us took different readings, and they're both valid. I think they were trying to be quite implicit in this episode that although they have a common ancestor, most life on most planets has at some point, you go back far enough, has a common ancestor, and they do say that, but they almost say that, I think they have a line where they say they've split off via different creatures, and I think that it sort of implied that Khalid split off from clams and the Thals, which was a reference to Genesis of the Daleks, obviously, and the Thals split off in another direction, but that two evolving species evolving in the same world will adapt in similar ways. So, bipedal form is going to be the most advantageous, so therefore natural selection picks it in both species, etc., etc. So I thought that there was a reason to make the difference there. And I felt that was less about the sort of the plot as it was about explaining why both the Khalids and the Thals went through this chemical holocaust. And as they talk about in the Daleks in 1963, the Thals mutate full circle and come out and look like, again, a bipedal form, whereas the Khalids react to that and come out in the Khalid mutant form or the Dalek form. So I think it was trying to explain that as well.
So I think they were forced in that Khalid mutant form by Davros. That wouldn't have been their form except he pushes them into it. Yeah, I mean, you may be right, but as I said, I was listening to it all and saying there are people in our world, many people in our world, who believe that black people evolved from apes and white people were made by God, and they hold that view. And they say, oh, well, yes, it looks like when you operate on people, they're the same. They look like, but no, the actual, if you go back far enough, you'll see the differences. I felt like that was the point they're trying to make, was, people are saying 1,000 Khalids, they're both humans. They're both exactly the same. But in their thinking and the way they've been raised and brought and taught, no, the Thals are from a lesser, inferior gene pool than we are. That's how I was taking it.
I certainly agree that the language that the Khalids used is meant to echo those sort of sentiments. I absolutely agree that there's meant to be an echo there, but I think that the tell is that when people think that, black people and white people are different. No, the old thing is, well, it's only skin deep. Cut us both, our blood is red. But they say that if you cut open a Khazan and you cut open a Thal, they are fundamentally different beings inside. So maybe they're trying to do, but maybe they're trying to have the cake and eat it too, and that's why it comes across so differently.
So they stated that, and then there's, but no, we do have lungs, we do have, and so to me, when they're actually justifying, anyway, I might be wrong. I just see the fact they actually were both the same, but their reason and their culture had made them say something different. And we talked about it before in terms of, I think we are such a product of how we're educated and our cultures. And if you are raised in a different country and a different culture, and you're fed a different way of news and a different way of getting information, then your fundamental beliefs can be totally altered. So,
of course. I mean, this is the great thing about the script. There is so much going on here that you can pick and take different emphases across the whole thing, which is why, as I say, everything we've been disagreeing on for the last 45 minutes, you can absolutely get where the other person's coming from. We're just interpreting this artwork in a different way.
Yeah. So other big things I just picked up on in terms of the episode, Davros talked about the fact that it's pain that keeps you alive. So when he meets his tutor for 15 years, because this is 15 years after the last episode. So the guy at the end, he turned into a mutant and was still alive. And Davros comes to that conclusion that pain keeps you alive. And so therefore that's why the Daleks are always in pain, which we learned from the new series. No weakness, no surrender, no death in the end. So this is where Davros is different to the Khalids, because the Khalids is shoot me on the field, rather than the shame, if I'm in pain, just kill me. Where Davros, actually, he's diverting from that belief, because he believes, no, we don't show weakness, we don't surrender, no death. The rocket ship, we get the first version of rocket ship from Genesis Daleks here. Molochs, the giant moths we talk about. Dows. Racial purity becomes a big theme here, and the Varga plans already mentioned. So there's some of the themes that first appear in this story, which, of course, picking up on all these Doctor Who stories of history. It's very clever.
Did we mention the Varga plants already? That was
only in passing, but let's give them their due, because Varga plants.
That was a huge element of the story. Probably the first half of the story involved the Varga plants, and great throwback to the Daleks master plan there.
Because Varga plants are one of those concepts that when I first, I think, heard a bootleg copy of the Mission to the Unknown soundtrack back when I was a kid, the Varga plants is one of those cool Terry Nation sci-fi concepts that just captures your imagination. So having them here, I think, was really, really cool. And I want to echo what Phil said about that realization that Davros makes at the end, that he is different to the Khalid philosophy, where having basically carried his friend across the battlefield and then back as a loyal comrade, and then when this guy basically does the whole honourable, romantic, I'm wounded, go on without me, Davros is like, well, you're a coward, screw you, and shoots him, just turns on him. And so that you can feel that whole philosophy coming out there. Can I give a couple of, not negatives, but interesting points to come out of this when I was listening to it? The first was that as good as Terry Molloy is in this, and particularly is going to be in the later episodes, I did think that 59-year-old Terry Molloy trying to play under 30 was a bit of a struggle, because he's doing the younger, lighter sort of thing, and it's very hard for him to then be angry and aggressive at the same time. You can sort of hear 59 years of being an actor coming through his throat. So nice attempt, but particularly coming off the back of Rory Jennings, who just is such a innocent young voice. I thought that was a bit of a contrast. The other thing I'm curious to find out from you guys, the first time I listened to this back in January, I knew that Peter Miles turned up as Nyder at some point. Now, the actor John Stahl, who plays the Supremo, I thought sounded so much like Peter Miles that every time he came into a scene, I'm like, oh, Nyder's arrived, and then realised it wasn't. Did you have the same reaction?
Yeah.
I did, actually, because, he's got that same kind of sort of Weasley voice that Nyder does. But he's also that's also not his accent. If you listen to the extras in the box set, he's actually very Scottish. So that is actually an RP he's putting on. So perhaps that has a bit to do with it as well. He's stifling his Scottish.
I think he's watched Genesis Daleks a couple of times beforehand, though, and he's emphasising a lot like Peter Miles, because there's a lot of his words it's because Peter Miles has a particular emphasis on how he emphasizes things, and you can really feel it in that performance.
Maybe because Peter Miles is only in episode 4. The guy, what was his name? John Stahl thought, oh, well, I'm playing a character like this Nider character. I'll do the Nider character. Did it for episode 2, episode 3. Then they've started the read through of episode 4. He's gone, oh, bugger, that character's in this. I probably shouldn't have done quite such a homage.
Maybe.
Perhaps. I just want to pick up on one thing that you said, Dave, in that episodes 1 and 2 are such a great setup for the world. And I found myself really enjoying the storytelling aspects of this, the political structuring of the world that we were in, and but this was the episode towards the end where, for me, this turned totally dark. Particularly with Calcula murdering her own daughter, and then Davros going and experimenting on her corpse. It was totally dark and it took a turn there at that point, and it never turned back for the rest of the series after that. So as good as that, it's certainly a turning point. The death of Yarvel was the turning point in the series for me, where it was like almost a different story altogether after that.
Yeah, I thought that the end of episode 1, where Davros and Calcula murder Davros's biological father very, very ruthlessly, I thought, okay, this has taken a dark turn.
Yeah.
You're right. When they then kill the daughter, it's like, okay, I didn't think you could level up on that, but they have.
But to be fair, she had tried to kill Davros too. So, she had betrayed Davros to the Thals. She had organised for him to be killed, but she was going to be hands clean. Betray him.
So you think you think she was just playing innocent? Do you think she really knew what was going on? Because she did say,
definitely.
I didn't know they were going to kill him.
No, but she betrayed him. So she
did betray him. Yeah.
So what else were they going to do with him? So she had handed her brother over to die, but she was doing it in terms of from a distance, as opposed to her mother, who would drown her, holding her down until she was dead. So it's a change in terms of method, but it was just as bad, just as calculating.
And that's that fantastic thing, because it again shows that Davros was not some unusual individual in this society. Davros is a product of this society and this family.
Yes.
They're all horrible.
It's important to note the family were dreadful, and they'd murdered we didn't even mention Mike Yates. We didn't even mention the father and aunt's performance in the first.
I had no idea that was Richard Franklin until I read the credits.
Yeah, he does do a great job. Like, he does such a good job. So you've got this family of so Calcula murdered both of them in the first episode. You've got her killing her own daughter in this one. You've got the daughter trying to kill her brother, and that's why it's I Claudius. It's the internal politics of the family is itself just disastrous, and killing off the tutors or trying to kill the tutors, and tutors trying to kill them because the father's killed the son. They've got all these interconnections. If you do a line of characters and the interactions. It's murder here, it's death here, it's shooting here, it's drowning over the. It's bizarre, but it's why it's so compelling.
Well, on that note, let's move to the third installment of I, Davros, which is called Corruption by Lance Parkin. I'll read a blurb. Logically, the war ends with one form of life in utter control of the world. All other life forms gone. That is the goal. That is the only true victory. Now established within the science elite, Davros and his team are pushing the boundaries of Khaled experimentation further and further forward. Access to Thal DNA spearheads an entirely new field of research for Davros, and he becomes more and more intrigued by genetic mutations. Others around him begin to fear him, his drive and obsessive need for power. Meanwhile, he must learn to cope with betrayal and political maneuverings that will leave him changed forever.
I realized that nothing could be allowed to get in my way. Not friend, not family. Loyalty, integrity, honesty, these were rare commodities in the Khaled city at that time. But as the years passed, I worked my way up into the scientific core and into the science elite. And from there I was able to make discoveries that would change the destiny of my planet forever. Discoveries that would eventually lead to you.
Explain!
I once said I would never understand how to play at politics. I discovered this was a lie. And without realizing it, I discovered that by playing one side off against another, true power could be mine.
You are not a member of the Council of 12, Davros.
My son is the most important person on the planet.
Practically changing before our eyes.
There's definitely mutation.
It is a blast ray as devastating as a lightning bolt.
This is proper warfare.
Complete cellular reconstruction.
On your knees, Davros.
They are devoted to survival.
We were there at the genesis of a species, Sean.
Protect the Supremo! Guards, get him away from here, now!
Are you willing to face death?
Find peace.
I, Davros, Corruption by Lance Parkins. The facts of the trivia. Number 1.3 in the I, Davros range. Terry Molloy played Davros. Caroline Jones, Lady Calcula. Katrina Olsen, Scientist Shan. John Starr, the Supremo. David Bickerstaff, Scientist Ral. Daniel Hogarth, Fenn. Sean Carlson, the Councillor Valtron. Lucy Beresford, Rena, and Nicholas Briggs, the Daleks. The director, once again, Gary Russell. Music and sound design by Steve Foxon. Producer, Gary Russell. Executive producer, Jason Haig-Ellery. Cover art by Stuart Manning. Sean Carlson, who played the counsellor in the story, is a favourite of Gary Russell's and had played Marvin in the Gallifrey series. Sean first appeared in flashbacks in the story Davros. Here she returns and plays the full role, played once again by Katrina Olsen. Katrina Olsen had also played the headhunter in the Lucy Miller stories with the Eighth Doctor. And Lance Parkins, who wrote this story, wrote the first Davros Big Finish story and was coming back to his characters from that first story, including Davros and Shan. And that's the facts of the trivia.
Thank you, Philip. And you mentioned Katarina Olsen there, and who was the other guy? David Bickerstaff, who also appeared in Davros 3 years earlier, doing those same roles in Davros. And those flashbacks were so good. There would have been such a temptation to just kind of repeat the flashbacks that were going on in Davros, but they didn't. They didn't here. They took a totally different tack. So you've got, if you want to get more of the story of Shan and Davros, you go back to Davros and listen to that story, because you get all those flashbacks there, which were really quite detailed, weren't they, Philip?
Well, I remember listening to Davros the first time and really wanted to know these characters better. And that whole Shan, it felt like a love story happening. But once again, there's still the politics in play in that Davros story with Shan. And yeah, that's right, in terms of the other characters too. Yeah, we'll talk more about Davros' characters soon, I'm sure. But yeah, it is worth listening to Davros for many reasons, and that's one of them.
Yeah. I know it's spelled differently, but is the character of Shan named after Sian Phillips, who played Livia?
You know what? I think it is. I didn't see. I looked for it, but I couldn't find anywhere. That'd be something worth asking Gary. But yes, I think that's a nod to Sian Phillips.
It didn't cross my mind because I'm visual, so I see the spelling of it, and because it's different. But now that you've said it, I see where you're coming from. Yeah. What were your thoughts on this particular episode, Dave?
If I said it was the weakest of the three, that would be a very that wouldn't be a fair statement, because weak out, like the weakest of these four is, a slightly lesser shade of brilliant. It's the one I think that has less of a hook. I think that the first two are all about the world building. You've got really young Davros, which is really cool, and you've got Davros becoming a scientist and becoming the person we know of him and exploring the world, which is really cool. Part four's got Davros in the chariot and the Davros that we know, so that's interesting. This is sort of the one that is just about getting Davros from where we left him to where he needs to be. Now, Lance Parkin is such a good writer that is all done really, really well, and at no point is it dull, but it hasn't quite, I think, got the same hook for me that the other episodes did, although it has got a couple of very grotesque moments as well that do stand out.
Yeah. Phil?
In many ways, this is Calcula's story, because it's her really trying to establish herself in terms of her power base and using youth to do it. And so she's using education, she's using youth to build a power base. So finally, when she's is actually killed later on, it causes all this rising in power, and it actually allows Davros to get the power he needs. So in terms of how did the elite scientist creation happen? Well, it actually did happen because of his mother, because of what she'd set up, because of the power that gave Davros to blackmail the Supremo. So a lot of it is the machinations of Calcula and what's going on in that situation, what is going on then, and the different people trying to have influence and power. So you've got that story going on there, and of course it's kind of the love story. It's not really, but it's Davros finding another mind, not as good as his, but he would still count as an important thinking mind. But also the horror of working out what he's doing. Because one of the things that these episodes don't really go into, and something it does, but you've got to work it out for yourself, is how evil is Davros? What is his motivation? What is he trying to do? Because he's not insane. It'd be nice if he was insane. It would be nice if he was just evil, and I'm not sure you could actually say he's evil either. So what do you do with a person who is driven and so intelligent and so sure they're right, and yet doing such things that is so horrendous to other people, but with the total assurance that what he's doing is the right thing to do in the long run? And so there's all sorts of questions about humanity and in terms of what we accept or what we don't accept. In many ways, Davros is a Hitler-like character, because people like to look back out of Hitler and say he was insane, he was crazy. Well, he wasn't. He was rational. He was unbelievably rational. It wasn't a rationality that I like. But everything he did was calculated and rational and planned, and he knew how to manipulate and control people, and he was followed by millions and millions of people who believed he was doing the right thing for them. So that sort of level of populism, which of course is kind of becoming important now in terms of how we view the world, and is democracy going to survive long term? Because it's democracy is only a fairly new thing in some ways. So it's questioning all those sort of things. So I don't know where you think Davros falls on the crazy scale, but he really, and I guess I took that from Genesis Daleks in terms of if to hold in my hand something that could destroy everything. There's a sense in which we want to say, well, it's either evil or insane, but actually it's not. It's about power, it's about control, which he believes is all that matters. So when you view life a particular way, what do you become? So that's a bit too deep. Is that too deep?
Well, no, because it's fascinating to look at this and question what Davros's motive actually is. He's not after power in the traditional sense. He doesn't want to be the Supremo. He doesn't want to be the ruler of an empire. He doesn't want money. It's very clear throughout this story that he's not manipulated by greed and avarice. He's not after sexual power. He's completely disinterested, effectively. Although there's a minor flirtation here, he's basically disinterested in sex and women. So what is it that he wants other than to be proved correct, and I think to serve the state? I think he genuinely believes in the superiority of the coloured race, and I use race in the worst possible, most loaded sense of that word.
Yeah.
He believes in the superiority of the coloured race, and he only wants power to achieve that goal, which is a extremely unusual motivation for a villain. Even villains who perhaps use those sort of nation-state fascistic goals do so because it's their way to get power in the traditional sense. It's the dictator with the big mansions and the palaces and the harems and the gold in the Swiss bank account. Davros doesn't want any of that, and I question if Calcula wants that as well. Calcula certainly likes her creature comforts. But I come back to what I said an hour or so ago. If Calcula wanted to be the Hitler or the Saddam Hussein or the Putin or whatever, or the Caesar, whatever historical archetype you want to use, I think Calcula could have got there. But she, I think, also just wants the success of her race. And her view is that the success of her son is the way to get the success of her race, which is what leads her to make the decision that she makes at the end of the episode, which to me proves that it's not about her.
Yeah.
It's about something different, something bigger.
Yes, she would rather die and save Davros's work than allow his work to be destroyed. So her life is less important than his work is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which would almost make her like in a traditional drama, that would make Calcula a noble character, except that what she wants is such a horrific thing that it's not.
Yeah.
I guess you have to think if you think of our planet Earth, if we were at war against some other bloc for the last 1,000 years, how would we be thinking? Would we be thinking along similar lines? It's hard to know because there's nothing to relate to in this. So that's why it's a fascinating story. We've got it's such an alien planet. We can't possibly relate to how they're thinking.
And you're right, Dwayne, because the purpose of the war, it is one of those fictional wars where the intent has been lost back in time. There's no evidence here that the Khalids want land or resources or to enslave the Thals.
No,
they don't actually want anything out of this war. This isn't
apart from wiping the other out. That's the implication,
this
isn't
isn't Putin saying, give me the Donbass region or the rest of the Ukraine if you're happy to. This is just, well, we're going to win because we have to win because we want to win.
Yeah. And I kind of say, I think this is helping us in a science fiction way examine things that have happened throughout history. And so, there are countries, there are wars, and things are complex. I mean, in our world at the moment, there's so many complex situations happening between nations, which it's easy to try and come up with a glib answer of how to solve something, but it's so much more complex. And that's why we're not seeing peace being easily settled in all kinds of regions across our world. There's the two big ones that we always think about in terms of Russia, Ukraine, and Israel, Gaza at the moment. But throughout Africa, there's bits of Asia. There's awful, dreadful things happening, but we don't know what's really going on. There's no proper reporting happening. We can't get people inside there to really tell what's going on, and we can't really get into the minds of the people who are leading those battles. Who knows what they're thinking? But this gives us a way of possibly trying to understand that people are complex, and how we think is complex, and how we justify things is complex. It's a good story.
Look, it is, and I refer to some horrific scenes in this, and the stuff in the nursery is I think probably
the darkest,
most horrific,
the absolute darkest,
and grotesque scene. And there's a part of you're right that goes, well, this is turning it up to 11 to sort of highlight what's happened. But you read about some of the experiments that Joseph Mengele did with pregnant women in concentration camps, and it is actually things that have happened. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to note too that during a lot of those concentration camps, in terms of what was going on in Germany and to the Jews, it is unbelievable the experimentation that was going on, and the scientists learnt tons and tons and tons of stuff, and yet once all that stuff was taken, it was all destroyed. Because when the conquering powers got hold and realized how all this information had been gained, and the experiments that had been done, and the things that had been done, all that scientific data was actually destroyed. Because the conquering powers said, this has been obtained in such an immoral, evil way, we can't keep this data. So the things that they've done with all these brain experiments where they'd cut open the tops of heads and poke different parts of the brain and destroy different parts of the brain while people were alive to work out what parts of the brain did what. All that information we could have held on to, but it was all destroyed. Whereas today, we keep all sorts of data which really is unethically gained, but we keep it anyway. So once again, it doesn't even show the morality has changed within our Western culture in the last 80 years.
Yeah. There's so many reflections of stuff in this in the real world, and of course, Nazi Germany is a very easy one to go back to. But you do something like you look at the Diary of Anne Frank, and the Diary of Anne Frank is in many ways a inspirational story. But for me, the most terrifying part of it is that somebody betrayed Anne Frank and her family. There was some very ordinary citizen who decided, I'm going to tell the authorities where that family's hiding. And that very ordinary act of bastardry, I think, is what you see a lot of in this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it does not continue to get any lighter. It gets just darker and darker. When we see the demand of Davros of the Supremo to build the base, the underground base that we see ultimately in Genesis of the Daleks. That happens there. But at the end of the episode, we get the bomb that comes and ultimately causes Davros disfigurement. That's how this episode ends, on that particular cliffhanger. It took us 3 episodes to get there, but we're about to move into the final part of I, Davros, which is called Guilt. And I'll read a blurb for that right now. That is our world out there, a chemical soup for a sky above and a scarred radioactive wasteland below. It is purgatory, but we must make it paradise. The Khaled city is now ravaged, and life has become one of fear, protected by a vast transparent dome that covers what remains of the city. The Thals undertake a desperate mission to take Davros away from his laboratories, and the Supremo must send a crack squad over enemy lines to retrieve his chief scientist. Led by the young, enthusiastic, and morally bankrupt Lieutenant Nida, Davros is successfully rescued. But he has been changed by the experience, and where once he stood for knowledge, he now espouses the utter extermination of the Thal people. To this end, Davros will stop at nothing and will sacrifice anybody to see his legacy continue. Here's to the future.
You were weakened. You were infirm. You were obsolete. You should have been exterminated.
No! You are wrong! They thought I was no longer a man. They thought I was no longer a scientist. They thought I was no longer a Khalid. They were wrong! I would prove that far from being a weakened, damaged object that they could just cast out into the wastelands with the Mutos, the Vargas, and the other genetic detritus from the war, I would grow stronger. I would grow powerful. I would fight back. The mistake made by the Supremo, by the Council of 12, by every citizen of the Khalid and Thal cities was to underestimate what I had become. What I would achieve. They underestimated me. Their final and gravest mistake.
We have enhanced brain activity.
I cannot move.
His chariot has been recovered.
So you're the infamous Davros.
Khalids do not negotiate with terrorists.
Not at all, sir. In fact, I'm a great admirer of yours.
Kalubech Khalid.
A male spy among us.
Your precious chief scientist.
Mother, is that you?
I killed him.
Exterminate. For federal control of all Khalid progeny. Men will become as gods.
I, Davros, Guilt by Scott Alan Woodard. The facts and the trivia. Number 1.4 in the I, Davros range. Terry Molloy played Davros. Peter Miles, Lieutenant Nida. John Stahl as the Supremo. David Bickerstaff as Raoul. Lisa Bowerman as Colonel Marash. Nicholas Briggs as Baron. Jennifer Croxton as Ludella. Scott Hancock as the Saboteur. Toby Hrickson Robinson as radio announcer. Gary Hopkins as the Thal soldier. And also Carolyn Jones and Lizzie Hopley reappear. Once again, directed by Gary Russell, music and sound designed by Stephen Foxton, producer Gary Russell, executive producer Jason Hegg-Ellery, and cover art by Stuart Manning. Scott Alan Woodward had written the previous Davros story, The Juggernauts. Peter Miles had played Nida back in 1975. This is his only Big Finish appearance.
He was 78 when he did this.
Yep. Baron, who turns into the Mark I travel machine, was played by Nick Briggs, who became the voice of the Daleks. Ironic they're using the same actor to cast and change over. And ironically, the very first Dalek was actually a Thal. This was Gary Russell's favourite show, and this was also Gary Russell's final day of working for Big Finish, employed as a Big Finish employee. He would later come back to write and direct some things, but this is the end of his time as a Big Finish executive producer and producer. That's the facts of the trivia.
Thank you, Philip. There was a cast member or two that I was going to focus on there. It was nice to see that some of the writers and other people involved in other aspects of the production were involved in as cast in here too. So Gary Hopkins. Gary
was very much bringing in his favourite people for the last day.
Yes, Yes, and this was his last day as at Big Finish. So, yeah, it was probably a bittersweet day, but probably more sweet than bitter because it was such a good cast and such a good story to have. Um, Philip, you've listened to this recently. What are your thoughts on the conclusion of I, Davros, the series?
It's one of those things which is inevitable in terms of how it's going to end, and so you kind of wait to see how it gets there, because this now ends about 6 months before Genesis of the Daleks.
Yeah.
So I guess by this stage I'm just feeling really depressed. After we're now into the 4th episode, I think the first time I would have listened to the month apart, and so I don't think it got so bleak. I listened to the 4 of these episodes in 3 days, and by the end I really was feeling so depressed. Because to me, this is just, it's too believable. The situations are too much, it's happened in history too much. And I'm at the moment feeling very negative about life, about the whole world situation, and thinking, I can see us plummeting into this again so easily. It doesn't take much for human beings to make bad choices that can lead to devastating effects for so many. And so this is sort of the plunge towards oblivion. And this final episode just sort of depressed me. The performances are just great. And I said, hearing this, I mean, Toby Robinson as the radio announcer, I was amused by, because he's their sound technician and does all the cooking for them, the Big Finish lunches. Apparently he did an amazing cake for Gary's last day. So just the fact that they sort of put him in. I wasn't going to read all the cast through, but it was just little sides which are just there. And of course, Lisa Bowerman, director and actress, and Benny Summerfield, performer. Gary wanted in. David Bickerson's back. It was really lovely having Peter Miles and Terry Molloy back together again. Well, it was actually, they were together, but I guess having Peter Miles playing against Davros. I must admit, Terry Molloy really has become my Davros. As much as Michael Wish's performance in Genesis Daleks is exceptional, and maybe it is the best Davros performance, Terry Molloy really now feels like my Davros, just because I've now heard him in so many stories and so many radio plays. So I think Terry Molloy has actually peeped Michael Wish as my favourite Davros for those reasons, even though Genesis Daleks is a superb story. And so Nida playing against him just seems so natural. It's just bleak and awful, but it sort of ended where it had to end. But to me, it was actually what I really, and that's what part of the reason why I do think the Thals and the Callans are the same, is because the first Dalek is a Thal, because Baron is a Thal traitor. What's the word? A spy who becomes,
pretending to be a Muto, isn't he?
Pretending to be, yeah. And so I actually think that the reason why, that's why another reason why I do actually think they're all heading down that way. I think, Dave, you made the point before in terms of, is this where they had to go? I do wonder how much this is Davros actually pushed them into this direction, and genetically alter them in such a way that's why they didn't survive, but the Thals did as humanoid. Because for Davros, it was all about the pain, maintaining the pain, maintaining that screaming, maintaining the travel culture, the dome, the power. We didn't mention the gun that Davros had built in the episode before, which sounds like a Dalek ray gun. There's all these little sound effects. Actually, even the doors, there's a lot of nods to a lot of the sound effects are the same as in Genesis. Yes. And so it just feels so familiar. But certainly, I mean, Genesis is a dark story too. But this even feels just a little bit darker than Genesis. But you can really see this leading beautifully into Genesis of the Daleks.
Yeah, the door sound effects in particular were incredibly reminiscent of Genesis of the Daleks. But Dave, what do you think of the use of his chair's been called a life support system on television, but it's now called the Chariot. What do you think of that?
I thought that was a very cool sci-fi word for sci-fi reasons, just because wheelchair sounds so ordinary,
Yeah.
and so I kind of got that. I thought this was a very clever episode. I just want to echo very quickly what you say there, Dwayne, about Genesis being a very dark story. And I think it's also always important to remember that although Garman was the notional goody amongst the Khalids in that story, Garman wasn't anti-Dalek or anti-experimentation. He just thought Davros had gone a little bit too far at the end. So this was not about goodies and baddies. It was about slightly worse baddies and baddies.
Yeah.
What's interesting about Davros is that I remember going into this And you sort of spend the entire story up until the roughly about 4 hour mark, where they get to the end of part 3, wondering when Davros is going to get into the chair. And I thought when there's the big strike on the education centre at the end of part 1, oh, that's the strike that's going to get him into the chair. And then when he's out in the wastelands and affected by radiation, oh, that's what's going to mutate and get him in the chair. And it really does keep your anticipation going, because you have to wait all the way until the final episode for Davros to get into the chair. And now Terry Molloy is doing that Davros voice and that Davros performance that we all know and love. And so I think that's a really good framing device. But even though I think that this is the big episode, it's the one that has the big gestures that gets you to that final situation of Genesis of the Daleks, there's lots of lovely nuggets in there, just little moments of introspection. Davros going back and reading the old storybook that he was fond of, that his mother used to read of him, which just brings all the eatable stuff back into sharp focus in this final episode. But even little nuggets in there, like you learn, and they don't say it explicitly, but it's very, very clearly said, that the ancient Dal word for God was Dalek.
Yeah.
And it's those little details that I think are exceptional. I think, just to go back to your point, Phil, about whether Davros pushed the Daleks there or not, it depends on how literally you take that idea that Davros has accelerated them to their final form, or whether you think that that's what he says he's done, but he has manipulated it along the way. And I think both are valid interpretations.
Yeah, I agree.
I found it very disturbing in a way, the scenes inside the nursery. Is that what it's called? The nursery?
Yes.
With Davros talking to the children like they're, in a very loving way. We see Davros as a very sociopathic throughout all of this, but when he gets in with his creatures, he treats them a lot like actual children, which is very strange. Very ruthless in the way he killed the Supremo, injecting the council with little bombs throughout their blood systems that exploded. That's a horrific thing to think about. So thank goodness it was on audio. It was very ironic that the very first Dalek was indeed a Thal, who turned out to be played by Nick Briggs.
So much racial purity.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. It does show that there is a certain level of lie to the use of that racial purity. But to link what Dwayne just said there back to what I raised right at the start of this conversation, I do think that the way that Davros uses the bombs to finally remove the Supremo and the Council of 12, the way that he uses NIDA and NIDA's elite force to effectively take control of the population, does to me reinforce that point that this is something that is eventually done to the Thals semi-willingly. What this could have been, and they've made a decision not to have it that, is the coloured people willingly giving power to Davros. And you don't see that. I think Davros has to force the children from them. He has to wipe out the ruling body to take control. And we know from Genesis that there is another ruling body. Yeah, there's another ruling body put over there, because you get Councillor Mogadon or whatever that guy's name is that takes over as and then interferes with Davros. So I think that's the one part of the sort of Hitlerian analogy that isn't there, because it isn't at the end of the day a political coup. It is a military coup, which I think is an important distinction.
But don't be under any impression the Thals any better, because the bits we see of the Thals blowing up their own people when they've laid bombs, betrayal, the Thals are equally. I guess is that what war does to us? War just makes us more and more corrupt.
That's the message.
Self-centered, evil. The price of war is what it does to our souls and personality.
Yes, although I don't think that's necessarily an absolute either. And I think that we've mentioned World War II a number of times. There are a number of wars where you look at it and go, was there really a good side and a bad side? No, there wasn't. I think World War II is a very demonstrable example where I will stand up and say there was a good side and a bad side.
Yeah. Yeah, but you are right. Most wars are more complex.
Absolutely.
The one negative that I have about this episode that comes to mind is the fact that, as much as I love hearing Peter Miles as Nida throughout this, you get a little bit of his story, but I would have liked to have got a little bit more of Nida's story, where he came from. I didn't really get a sense of much where he came from. He sort of just appeared all of a sudden. And I would have liked to have got a bit more of that. It might have been nice to get Nida weaved in through maybe episode 3 and 4 rather than just 4. But
Yeah,
it's only a minor criticism.
Yeah, he rocks up as a ready-made true believer. And it'll be interesting to know just a little bit more about what made him such an easily led true believer.
But it wasn't called I Nida. It was called I Davros. Yeah. Beat you to it, Philip.
Can I pull back a little and give you 2, again, minor negatives that I think with the entire story, but are highlighted as we get towards the end of the episode. The first is that the framing device that they use for these stories proves to be completely and utterly unnecessary. I don't think it was needed. I don't think it was necessary. So
There's no payoff, is there? We never go back there.
No, so I thought that was a very, very odd choice. The other thing is, I don't know whether this is a positive or negative, but it is a important takeaway I had. I said at the very start of this conversation, I listened to this both times and said, this is probably the best Big Finish story I've ever heard, and that's an unfair concept. And it's an unfair concept, I think, because this strays so far from mainstream typical Doctor Who that it's allowed to do things you could never do in Doctor Who. So, of course, it stands out as being different and better in the way that Torchwood Children of Earth goes to places that you could never imagine a David Tennant season of Doctor Who going to. So it stands out as being better. The way Andor goes to places that you couldn't imagine mainstream Star Wars going. So it stands out and feels better. So I think this is both a cheat, but who cares? It's a fantastic one. But that was really highlighted as you could feel them getting closer and closer and closer to episode 1 of Genesis of the Daleks, that I was trying to imagine the Fourth Doctor, as played by Tom Baker, strolling into this world, and I couldn't do it. I just think this world is so bleak and so dark and so far from what you could get away with on television in Doctor Who in any year of the show that I couldn't imagine it. In the same way I remember getting towards the end of watching Andor, which I think is a fantastic series and the best Star Wars I've ever seen, but I tried to imagine Palpatine turning up in Andor, sort of doing all these, sort of all that sort of ridiculous sort of sci-fi movie stuff, and going, it would make no sense in this very realistic story. And so my question is this almost so realistic and bleak that it's not Doctor Who at all?
Could you see this as part of the world that you see in the opening and closing scenes of The Magician's Apprentice, perhaps? Is that a bit more along the lines of this, what we get here?
Well, probably not really, because at the end of the day, that was just a quarry with some hands and some mist. No, I don't think there was anything particularly... I mean, we didn't see Khaled society in those stories, so...
No.
I get where you're coming from, but no, I don't think so, no.
Okay.
I mean, Doctor Who couldn't go this bleak. I mean, Genesis Daleks is bleak, but it couldn't go this bleak. Though it wouldn't have been hard to push it that bit further. So you could really. I mean, I do think you can see Terry Nation's heart in this. Certainly, I mean, Genesis Daleks. You see, he does have a very bleak side and a very black side, and I do think this is. I mean, the naming conventions they've used here for the characters and all those things, I think, are all very Nation-esque. And we're not looking. We're not really talking about Terry Nation at the moment, but this is something that could come from the pen of Terry Nation in terms of concept.
If you said Terry Nation, write something that's going to be broadcast after 10 p.m.
Yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
And I suspect these writers have taken a bit from Blake Seven in terms of they've looked at Terry Nation's survivors, they've looked at Blake Seven, and they've actually taken from that because tonally this fits in a lot more with some of those shows. I guess for me, this is just. It's a very clever way of giving a lot. This feels canonical. It does feel like Davros. It does feel like his life. I would happily say yes. This is all part of the canon of Davros, because nothing in it strikes me as out of the range of what Davros would do, would say, would act. But because of that, it's actually very depressing.
And indeed, to the point that the scenes where Davros first awakens after he's been put in the chariot do match very, very well with the flashback scenes that Ben Aronovich gives Davros in the novel of Remembrance of the Daleks.
Yeah, it does.
And just on the framing of the story that you mentioned before, it may make a little bit more sense if you go back and listen to the way that Davros, the Doctor Who story with the Sixth Doctor, is structured, because the flashback scenes that you get in that are similar to this. The Davros is talking to the Daleks and he's flashing back, as well as the story going on. So there's actually 3 narratives going on in the Davros story. So it might be worth, if you listen to Davros, if you haven't heard it before, it might be worth listening to at least Davros. Yeah, Davros is the only necessary one, I would say, to listen to before you listen to this as a kind of prequel of sorts.
No, that's really good advice. I will have to do that. I've also bought Omega to listen to at some point as well. So I'll have to get
that
Davros
is
as well.
Utterly brilliant.
Yeah, I remember you guys saying that.
The whole trilogy is great.
Yeah, the whole trilogy.
I remember you guys
and the Master too. Wow.
Yeah, and I remember you guys saying that, and some others said that at the time that the last season had Omega. So everyone's like, no, go listen to Omega. So I have bought it, and I'll listen to that. I'll do Davros as well. I do think it's worth noting, though, that as much as I'm critical that the framing device wasn't paid off, I'd perhaps be even more critical if they had a payoff ending scene at the end of this episode, because the ending is so perfect. I was driving to work today, listening to it, and you can feel the Daleks coming, the Mark 1 travel machine, the first Dalek, the first line uttered by a Dalek, and just as I'm going, right, we're there, let's go, out.
Yeah.
And if ever there's an example of the stage law that always leave the audience wanting more.
Yeah.
My God, that exit was just perfect.
Yeah. No, you're desperate for the next bit, aren't you? You just, oh no, what happens next? But not to happen.
Totally.
Now, if you get the Davros complete series from Big Finish, you can buy them individually. But if you get the complete set, you will also get the Davros mission, including the making of Davros as well, which is a great little documentary. But did either of you get a chance? Philip, did you listen to the Davros mission as well? Have you? Had you heard it before?
I have listened to it many, many years ago, but not recently.
Yeah, and you didn't either, Dave?
No, again, I wasn't aware it existed until I went onto the TARDIS wiki and started researching this. And by then it was lunchtime today.
So it's not connected to Davros, apart from the fact that Big Finish did it for the Davros DVD box set that they released years ago as a special one-off. And then I think probably when 2 Entertain went under, the rights went back to Big Finish, so then they could distribute it themselves. So the Davros mission is actually set immediately after revelation of the Daleks. So he's on the prison ship getting transported back to Skaro, and there is a Thal who is coming in. She's basically a Thal psychologist who is coming to try and get into Davros's head and try and change him in some way. So it's definitely not on the same. But mind you, the Thal scientist is played by Miranda Raisin, so it's worth listening to that just for Miranda as well. So for those who don't know who Miranda Raisin is, she appeared in the TV series as Tallulah in Daleks in Manhattan, and she was also she's also one of the Big Finish Sixth Doctor companions, Constance Clark. She's amazing as Constance. So
Spooks,
one of her. She's in Spooks too, is she?
She's in Spooks. Yeah, that's her. That's one of her big roles. She's fantastic in Spooks.
Yeah, well, she's good in that too, and it's a little bit different. It's produced by Nick Briggs, so it's a different line altogether from Davros. He's going in a different direction, and because of where it's at in Doctor Who chronology, there are some elements of potentially slip back in there as well. If you've heard it, you'll know what I mean. But it is much better than slip back. I'll give you that. So that's worth a listen to.
Not hard.
Now before I finish up, was there any final thoughts that you had about Davros that I had not asked you or you'd forgotten to mention? Philip, anything from you?
Oh, that's more than enough. But I could keep talking for hours because I love this. It's great.
Yeah, feel free. Dave, what about you?
No, I've said everything I had written down to say and plenty more. I walked in saying it's probably the best Big Finish I've heard, and whether that's a cheat or not, I stand by that. It's probably the best Big Finish that I've heard.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's an incredible piece of work. And congratulations to Gary Russell for saving the best till last. That's all I can say before he moved on. All right. Before we finish up, I just want to quickly go to let you know what I'd like to recommend apart from Davros, but I can't because it's actually my list here tells me it's Philip's turn to make a recommendation. Have you been listening to anything apart from Blake 7, Philip?
Well, I was going to recommend Blake 7.
Go on then.
It's all I've been doing for the last couple of weeks. By this stage, our first episode, Blake 7, The Way Back, episode 1 will be out. We've already released an introductory episode beforehand, but our first episode is coming out. So if you enjoy Davros, if you enjoy that sort of darker side of Terry Nation, Blake 7 is a great way to go, especially season 1 and 2. It's become a bit more interesting. It's always so much to talk about. Can I say, Dave also has a stunning Blake 7 podcast called Spacefall, and part of the reason I've started doing this one is because I've waited so long for him to come up with his next episode. I got fed up waiting for him.
Just given up.
Given up. And I do understand there's a couple more episodes coming out soon. So Blake 7, I can hardly recommend Spacefall. It is actually my favorite Blake 7 podcast.
Thank you.
But second favorite is mine and Dwayne's and Todd and Chris. And so episode 1 will already be out, which we also have Michael Bryant talking about making the way back and some of the things he did. And episode 2 will have Sally Navette talking about coming on board too and talking about her time as well. So yeah, it's a YouTube channel, Blake 7 Way Back, or it's on Spotify now, and Dwayne's going to teach me how to get into other places as well because I'm still trying to work all those things out. But if you actually watch it, there's a lot of videos, photos, things that go with it. So it is actually worth watching, I think. But if you're driving a car, don't do that. Just listen to it. That's fine.
Very good. Dave, what about you? What would you like to recommend for us?
Firstly, thanks to Phil for those kind words about Spacefall. We have released all the way up to Volcano, but we've recorded all the way up to Moloch. So there are a whole bunch in the can ready to be released. So more of that soon. I've been really going down the path of the William Hartnell. I don't know what the correct Big Finish term for is. I don't think they're companion chronicles. They're early adventures or something. Early adventures, yeah. So the ones that William Russell, sometimes with Carol Ann Ford, does, where he tells stories.
That's Companion Chronicles.
No.
Companion Chronicles.
No. It's the full cast ones, or just the two of them?
A bit of both. I wouldn't say full cast, but a semi-full cast. Look, whatever they're called, stories with William Russell in them that I was listening to before he died and have since with a certain sense of melancholy. Some great stories I've really enjoyed in there because I'm a big fan of the Hartnell era. Stuff like The Doctor's Tale, Flames of Cadiz, Domain of the Vord, Transit of Venus. This has been a really lovely, wonderful set of Big Finish that I've
There's a bit of both. They were early adventures too.
Well, there you go. I'm not a big Finish aficionado. I just listen to what I like, and I don't care what umbrella they come from. I just like these stories. I like hear William Russell telling these stories, sometimes supported very well by Carol Ann Ford. So yeah, I've really been enjoying those.
Yeah, they're great.
Very good. Now I'm going to recommend something that I haven't listened to yet, but I'm going to, and I'd recommend everyone else to too, and you too, Philip, because this is next on our list of stories to listen to for the podcast. We are going back to the main range, the monthly range, and we're going to listen to a couple from the mid-150s. So the first one we're going to listen to is The Doomsday Quatrain, which is a Nostradamus story. And the second one will be The House of Blue Fire, which is an excellent story. And if you had to pick from both of those, the one I remember most is House of Blue Fire, because I've listened to that more than the other one. So looking forward to listening to them both. That will be next time on the Sirens of Audio. Philip, there's your homework for next time.
Great. Love hearing it when we're talking live, but that's good. Send them to me so I remember.
Yeah, and I should of course say that if you'd like Doctor Who, I am involved in a Doctor Who podcast, the Doctor Who shows you said at the start. So please check us out in all the usual podcast places.
Very good. What have you been up to lately? What have you been talking about?
5 episodes this month.
Yeah, so our main episode last month was talking about the Peter Cushing Dalek movies. We've then done a list makers on top 5 master stories. We've just released a Gin and TARDIS on the Mark of the Rani. There's a special secret coming out next week, which I'm not at liberty to divulge. And our topic for our end of August main episode is a deep dive into Season 23, Trial of a Time Lord.
All right. It's been brilliant getting together with you guys, and that's... let this be a lesson to you, Dave. If you tweet that you like something by Big Finish, you will be asked to come on and talk about it. So be warned, be careful what you put out there on social media. But thanks very much for joining us, Dave. It's been a privilege.
No, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed chatting about a really, really good Big Finish story.
Awesome. And Philip, wonderful to be in your presence as always.
Indeed, and to be in yours.
Happy editing, Blake 7, The Way Back.
Thank you. I finished number 1 now, up to number 2.
Very good. All right. Until next time, we'll catch you later.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
This has been the Sirens of Audio, reviewing I, Davros, with our guest David Kitchen and your hosts Philip Edney and Dwayne Bunny. Theme music by Joe Kramer. Catch up on all the latest info, including news on our live events at sirensofaudio.com. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to our brand new podcast, Blake 7, The Way Back. Got some feedback? Send your email to sirensofaudio@gmail.com or find us on all our social media at Audio Sirens. Thanks for listening, audiophiles. We'll hear you next time.